Welcome to Trailblazers, a joint WION DMA Asia initiative. In his seminal 1974 work, The Inner Game of Tennis, Timothy Galway argued that the key to innovation was not knowledge, but ignorance, unlearning, and to try and achieve a state of relaxed concentration. Is this the key to innovation? Joining me today are an esteemed panel of guests to debate the topic of innovation. Damayanth from Oppo, veteran of the tech and sports marketing world. Ganapati from LT Foods, King Cobra of the Indian food scene and ex of the Darbar parish. Ram, a man of many parts, currently with DDB Mudra. Puneet from Case Construction Equipment, ex of JCB, understands the rural marketing scene of India inside out. And finally, Sucleen from the Good Glam Group, expert in FMCG, beauty, ex of L'Oreal, Garnier and Unilever. Welcome to our Trailblazers. Now our first guest joining us on stage is Damayanth from Oppo. I'm obsessed by one thing you told me before, which is Sachin Tendulkar's socks. How on earth can this start a show about innovation? Now, I've got my red socks. Tell us about his socks.
Most innovations come from a relevant question being asked. And I think in the context of Sachin, it was essentially, this was 2007. He called us up and said, I need to kind of get an upgrade in my socks.
This is Adidas.
And this is an Adidas. And so basically I did what any good boarding school boy would do, which is I picked the most expensive pair of socks in the range and I sent it to him. 2 days later, he calls back and says, nonsense, doesn't work for me. And so what he wanted was not a regular towel sock, but something that would kind of enable him to wear the same pair throughout the day and allow him to feel better, allow him to kind of not get blisters, etc. So it was a pretty tall ask. We basically created a tank of a sock that this gentleman loved.
It's an awesome way to start our inner show. But sort of moving up from the socks further up, let's talk about this thing, right?
Yeah.
You talked about this thing being the little monster. Talk to us, particularly with your current Oppo experience and Apple, about how you think about tech marketing.
Yeah.
And is less more?
What we're kind of, increasingly trying to do at Oppo is, these are amazing productivity devices. You can't live without one. But what we're trying to do is, for example, with the product that we've just launched recently, we're trying to kind of put the tech into the background and make it less intrusive. And so what we've done with the Oppo Find N3 is essentially let the product sit in the background and still behave and act as the productivity device that it's supposed to without it necessarily intruding into your life. So what we've done, for example, is the cover screen of the phone literally runs 40 apps. So you don't even need to kind of lift your phone or unfold it for you to kind of use your phone to make a call or otherwise send a message back. Notion of nomophobia is again something that we've tried to kind of ease by introducing innovations like we call it Super VOOC, but you can literally charge your phone and Oppo device in less than 10 minutes to 100%. These small little iterations that we kind of making, this what we call this notion of iterative innovation, or what we kind of credit this as being innovation that impacts society positively at large.
You've done Adidas, you've done the mighty Apple, Oppo now. You've had a big career and you're only really in the second innings of a sort of 5-day test. But where are you at with innovation? What's your personal innovation credo? Do you have one? Is it just process? Is it light bulb? How do you think about that?
I think going through life without acknowledging that you need to kind of evolve and change on an ongoing basis, I think is the first part. So this notion of continuous improvement, this sense of always being seeking, being curious is, I think, super important. My dad was in the army, and we would basically move.
And you were in like 8 schools by the age of 8, practically.
Exactly. And so we would basically move schools. We would move cities every 2-3 years, and I think what it did to me was essentially force me to kind of evolve as a person. You were a very different person if you were in Bombay versus what you were in a small city called Firozpur in Punjab. So the other one that I really kind of find useful is what the All Blacks use, which is this notion of divine discontent. And the All Blacks, as you know, are one of the most successful teams in team sports. And the notion of divine discontent essentially is never being happy, with where you are and what you might have done. Because there's always something in what you've done or what you've created or what you've put out in the world in which you should seek the imperfection. Right? You should always kind of try and figure out what can I do better? What is it that I can kind of improve even further?
Damian, I think that's a fantastic place to sign off, despite the fact that we'll now suffer divine discontent having to terminate our session. But a bit about socks, a bit about phones, a bit about the All Blacks. You've come a long way from Firozpur. Thank you so much for being on Trailblazers. We really appreciate it.
Cheers, thanks.
And now we're joined by Ganapati from LT Foods. Let's start this off with a basic idea. You know, we're talking about innovation, and we've just had Damian with his shiny phones. Now we're into rice, right? And I don't know, from a viewer perspective, maybe their hearts sink and think, rice, that's a staple, I've got it every day. But actually, you've got a really interesting story about rice and innovation. Start us off with that.
A lot of times I think it's great disservice that rice, which is the most commonly had staple across the globe, does not get enough mention or conversation, part of conversations. You know, when you get into a business of consumer food, and you'd appreciate that much better, you would want to speak to the consumer about what they do with the product rather than what we make. And that's where they started off. Way back, we understood the importance of how biryani as a recipe in the country is taking the world by storm. Actually, an Indian recipe.
And it's the big dog biryani, isn't it? Really.
Yes. And it's an Indian creation. For all the myths surrounding it, it's an Indian creation. And you know, as part of our portfolio, we picked up one of our products, called it the Dawat Biryani. That's the branding which we did. This was way back in 2010. We wanted to provide a product which gave the most cherished recipe coming out of rice a platform. You know, it's like a canvas you provide for Michelangelo to paint. Michelangelo still needs the best of colors. And a couple of years back, we said, how can we actually get people to celebrate this favorite dish? So we came upon the thought of celebrating the World Biryani Day. We instituted that last year.
Talk about the process of selling it internally, right? Before you get to the customer, you've got to get it through your bosses, they've got to get it through their bosses.
So it starts off unlearning, learning, and learning it fully.
And
much better than
deep, right?
Yes, much better than anybody else out there.
Yeah.
And that gives you the confidence to kind of sell your thought. And it obviously, you know, it can't be a vague, out of the place thing. It's got to be rooted in what you believe the people, the consumers at the end of the day need.
Yeah,
need it latently.
And if you don't believe it, like, they're never going to believe it.
Nobody's going to believe it.
But just following this on and staying on the idea, Ganapati, of what makes an innovative man. I mean, you're someone who, you're a keen birder. You're out there looking at the migratory birds in Delhi.
Yes.
You're a historian buff, right? You're a man of parts. You're a physicist.
Yes.
From before.
Yes.
Has this all helped you, this kind of hinterland?
Yes, certainly. You see problems in various shapes and sizes, and you try and interpret it in multiple faculties you're exposed to. So it helps you. It helps you tremendously.
Yeah. We're kind of in the final furlong here, but let me just ask a slightly provocative question, right?
Sure.
Is there actually anything new about innovation? Right? Don't you just have to be new and innovate all the time? It's become this sort of idea. Do you think to a certain extent it's just a bit of MBA jargon?
So I'll tell you, if you fall into the trap of wanting to innovate for the sake of innovation, that's a problem. And that's a serious problem for a lot of people. And that's why I guess strike rates on innovation, being successful, are so low. Because there are people who are trying to innovate for the sake of innovation.
Yeah.
As I said, you know, you keep up with the curiosity, you try and unlearn, you try and be humble, and try and be brave with the idea you really thought of.
But look, Ganapati, are you more innovative now as such than you were 20 years ago?
I think I'm as curious as I was. I think that's the deal there. Keep your child alive inside you. And I look forward every day to meeting people who are more curious than me.
Ganapati, that's really fascinating. A tour de force that starts with something as simple as rice, but ends in something as profound as discover your inner child. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you.
And now I'd like to ask Sakleen from the Good Glam group. We're talking about innovation. Yeah, you've been across lots of different organisations, and without, it's always a bit invidious to compare one brand with another, but just talk about how your views of innovation have changed through that journey across these great brands.
So when I started my journey, I distinctly remember consumer intimacy is one thing that we immensely took pride in Unilever. You know, whether it was to go and live with your consumer or study them by being one with them, you know, and developing that empathy of being able to see the world from their eyes by asking the 4 whys. Every time you heard something, having the patience to distill the 4th why. But why do you do this? So that you can inherently get into the human motivations that drive people.
Was that hard when you were learning the trade, right? So in a country as diverse and as socially stratified as India, but a place like Unilever, you're right in the weeds of the argument. Was it hard to start to understand people?
So I came from a background in sociology. So fundamentally, human mind really excites me. So at some level, if you're able to understand who we're talking to and what's the need that's driving them at
and
the
this
back
is like
of it.
shelter, food,
absolutely,
etc.
And then you can actually, and you know, the way, if you ask me in which way do I really believe the world evolved, is in the last 2 decades, when I started my career, we were still looking for that lowest common denominator, which could cater to a wide mass, so that the products had potential, you could create fewer, bigger and scalable products. Today in the world of direct-to-commerce, and even with the number of online brands that have come in, I think what we've been able to pay tribute to is niches. You're able to now create products for a specific bespoke niche and find an audience for it.
You've been at the front end of any number of innovative campaigns. Which ones stick in your mind and why?
When I look at brands like Durex or Harpic, they were all pioneering within their categories, and therefore advertising or creating advertising on them which are fundamentally moving human needs of either pleasure and intimacy or sanitation, are very primal human needs. I think those brands allowed us to create a lot of advertising which could really move emotions in the center of plate. But I think most recently in the last 2 years, having worked in a consumer tech company, I would perhaps talk about the power of content integration to make a brand mainstream. So recently with Good Glam itself, we have a brand called My Glam, which is our pioneering makeup brand. We were able to gamify the entire usage experience on both 2 mainstream shows in India, Coffee with Karan and Big Boss. So I think that entire experience of being able to create a 360 content creation journey using tech at the heart of it was something which I thoroughly enjoyed.
But okay, staying on other campaigns, so if you cast your mind back a bit when you started your career, when you look back then, was there a certain idea that innovation was easier before the clutter of digital?
The positive side of it is it allows you to innovate faster, get feedback faster, and also listen to your consumers. Like reviews and ratings make it instant on what consumers think about your product. The hard part of it is that it also led to a lot of fragmentation, and not just on product side, but also on media side, which definitely is a much harder problem for marketers to solve today than I would say perhaps it was a decade ago.
Is innovation a young person's game?
I think innovation is definitely a curious person's game, but also a very hungry person's game, because it does need you to be a bit of a contrarian, because unless you question, you are not going to innovate and create something new. But equally, it needs you to be extremely patient and persistent, because there are going to be perhaps more failures than success. Everyone talks about the success, but not the 99% things that fail. But unless you're persistent, you don't touch gold.
Yeah, Sakleen, you've been a fantastic guest. Thank you so much for coming on Trailblazers.
Thank you, Jasper.
Delighted to be joined by Ram. You've done innovation across the spectrum. You've been an entrepreneur many times. You've been on the agency side, principal side. And you're in a kind of unique position. I know you're a man that loves research and academia. What's your starting out? What is your personal philosophy?
I have a very strong sense of belief on what can be invented and what only can be innovated for an industry. But if you look at mobility as a space, there was wireless. Everything on top of it is actually innovation. So if you look at it, the airways which we keep talking about, it started with 2G, edge, you went to 3G, 4G, 5G. But all of the fundamentals were invented, which was mobility. That was the core, right? And therefore, I strongly believe that you don't come with inventions every second day. There is a big possibility of innovating on what already exists.
Do you feel fundamentally that when it comes to innovation, it's all about solving fundamental human things as opposed to making new things?
More or less. There will be needs where you'll have to invent. For example, the vaccine that got invented for all of us globally on COVID had to be invented, because there's nothing like that which existed to arrest that virus. But everything otherwise, like I said, is normally on fundamentals that exist, and you innovate on top of it.
You know, COVID created the pressure
Right.
for a vaccine in the same way that being client-facing,
Right.
you can't just sit on your backside,
Yeah, you cannot.
right? Is pressure a big part of innovation?
No, I think that innovation comes out of a need which exists, but somebody has not actually cared at looking at it deeply, right? I mean, look at all the innovations that have happened at scale in India.
How do you personally keep yourself loose enough, or keep your clients loose enough, to see what problems are out there to solve and innovate against?
It's another important aspect for you to be successful when you're looking to solve for problems for clients, because they're looking up to you. And for that, you need to continuously be reading a lot, researching a lot, understanding a particular category, which at the heart makes you confident when you deal with clients who are looking for solving problems.
What's your advice to up-and-coming marketeers about how they become more innovative?
I honestly believe that it starts with the gut instinct to begin with. It comes not from your brain, or it actually comes from your gut. You know that you need to do this so that you're going to solve for a whole host of issues that you're probably addressing. And then how you refine it becomes part of that solution that you're looking for as answer.
Well, as a restaurant man, I'm totally pro-gut. Ram,
I liked all your breakfast this morning.
Thank you very much. You've been a great guest. Thank you so much for
My
being on
pleasure.
the show.
Thank you so much.
Ask Puneet from Case Construction Equipment. You, with JCB and Case Construction Equipment, have been absolutely at the front line of building India, right? Here we are in a fancy film studio, but you've been out in the country. You're an expert in marketing to rural communities. When we talk about innovation, take us back to that. Get us grounded again.
There's 130 crore people, and they deserve a better infrastructure. And with the infrastructure improvement, actually, a lot of economic activities which are taking off. A lot of industries which I've never heard of, food processing, for example, is largely because of the infrastructure development which has happened.
Do you say construction is very enabling? There's
Yes.
not many things that are more enabling. Do you find that quite motivating in terms of making you innovative?
Yeah, I think my take on innovation is, Jasper, that you don't have to do a disruptive innovation every time, right? There is always a bit of innovation, scope of innovation every time, everywhere. And not necessarily the innovation has to be in the product side. In the distribution, in the marketing stuff, in your training stuff, in your HR stuff. All those small innovations add up.
In your socks?
In your socks. And they add up and become a large innovation. I'll just quote an example. When I was with JCB, what we thought, let's go to those centers where the demand will come in future. And let's go and create that demand. See, India is a big country, and the kind of infrastructure we need hands. We need people to actually participate in that growth story. So the second innovation, what we did in terms of customer acquisition. And we thought, let's not acquire a customer who is a competitor customer. And let's go and create new customers, right? And that's something which we are doing in Case Construction as well. We are running a project called LEAD. And we thought, let's not create a customer for, say, construction equipment alone. Let's try and create the entrepreneurship. And through entrepreneurship, let's try and create the livelihood. Actually, we have broad-based it, Jasper. So we are not limiting ourselves to only construction equipment. We are going to villages. We are talking to the people. We are making them aware about what all they can do. Whether it's a fishery, it's agriculture-based occupation.
You're an urbane guy. Lots of kind of urban people here. Going out into the country the first time, meeting that customer, was that difficult?
Actually, we learn from the customer. And my personal philosophy is that innovation starts from the customer need. The trick is how quickly I'm able to understand and identify that need and provide him a solution.
How you use digital, for example, in rural marketing?
Absolutely. So when we took on this journey, we identified that in a home, when they're buying a capital equipment, the sons and daughters of the family, they make a lot of difference, and their voice is now heard more than the commercial voice which the father or the uncles would have. So through our digital campaigns, we identified those influencers in those rural communities, and we tried to reach to the next generation. It has helped us to reach out to the larger number of people, also to make them aware that what can be done. The pace at which our infrastructure is going is tremendous. So not only more and more people are required to participate in that growth, the women of the society are also required to participate both for operating the machines as well as manufacturing the machines.
Yeah, those are amazing insights, and great to start with the socks.
Yeah.
And end in the earth of India. Thank you so much for joining us on Trailblazers.
Thank you. Pleasure is mine.
Thank you. Thanks to all of our amazing Trailblazers on this episode discussing innovation. Is innovation a process, a system, a culture? Well, it's all of those things, but I think the thing we've really learnt is the I in innovation is where it starts. It starts with I, it starts with the individual. Nurture your interests, nurture your hinterland, go deep on your insights, because in the end, if you don't believe it, no one else is going to believe it. I'm Jasper Reed, and join me on the next episode of Trailblazers, a joint WION DMA Asia initiative.